Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. Work Wellbeing. It's a term that was very rarely mentioned even a few years ago. But these days, it's on everyone's lips. And there's a high expectation among workers that employers facilitate well-being in the workplace. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Social researcher Mark McCrindle, along with fellow researcher Ashley Fell, have conducted a survey on the attitudes of workplace well-being, the results of which have been published in a new book called Work Wellbeing: Leading Thriving Teams in Rapidly Changing Times. So what precisely is work well-being, and why has Mark decided to focus on it? He explains to Heather Dawson.
Work wellbeing is an analysis of how employees, staff members are going in their roles, how flourishing or thriving they are in themselves, and it looks at the contributions that work can make to someone's overall well-being. We're well aware of workplace health and safety, but mental health has risen up the ranks a bit more, and broader life health and well-being as well. And that's what we focused on in this book, looking at how work can help us thrive rather than be an impediment to our well-being in our lives.
Okay, and so can we say that COVID has brought this on?
Yeah, it did bring a bit more of a focus, and in fact it showed us how work is key to our well-being, can be one of the key relational connection points, can be a key point of growth and belonging and engagement. And when we had the lockdowns, when we had some of the isolation that people have experienced, much of the continuity of their life, the structure, the regularity of their life came through work. So work was shown in this time to really have a great importance in our life. We spend more than a third of our waking hours in any given week at work. We spend more than half of the years of our ever-growing lives at work. And so it has to be something more than just something that provides a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And for many, we found in this research for this book, work is a key place where they find purpose in life and growth and identity and connection and belonging. And again, the lockdowns, the uncertainty of the last 18 months has really highlighted some of the benefits of work in our lives.
So tell us a bit more about the survey, the research that you've done, Mark, with your co-researcher Ashley Fell, and you've now both written a book together about it. Who did you talk to, and what sorts of questions did you ask?
We ran a series of studies of employed Australians, just asking them what matters most to them in work, how they're going with their work, whether there are any blockers or challenges in their work. And for 4 in 5 Australians, they said, there were some blocks in their role. They weren't completely and totally satisfied in their work, which shows that there's just areas for improvement. And we asked, what matters more to work? And again, in some of these studies of more than 1,000 and a representative sample of workers in Australia, they said that what matters more than conditions and earnings is the culture and the values of the organisation. The majority said that when thinking about health and well-being issues at work, it is the role of the employer to make sure that that is facilitated. That when it comes to our thriving in our roles, even above things like a job description and colleagues, it's the leader of the team that has the biggest impact in how we go in our workplace and how much we end up loving our work. And we found very clear correlations between those that said they're thriving in their work, they enjoy their work, they feel that they achieve well-being at work, and the people who said they feel their productivity is high, they feel engaged with their employer, so tenure is going to be longer, and that also they feel that it's an employer of choice. They're more likely to talk well of their employer, to further develop that employer brand. So there are great outcomes with organisations that provide well-being, engagement and thriving from their team members.
Now, that's quite a lot for employers to take on board. You do have quite a list of things that people would like as a result of COVID. What did you discover?
We found that employees are looking for work that can have purpose, where they see the outcomes of their role, that they're making a real contribution, that they're in a workplace that has belonging or a culture that they can align with and that helps them achieve some of these broader outcomes of life. In other words, it was the pull factors to that role that were meaningful for them. We found that many people leave jobs not because there's a compelling reason to leave, but because there's no compelling reason to stay. So it wasn't so much a push factor that caused someone to leave a role, just some dissatisfaction with something, but more that there weren't enough reasons for them to stay on board. In fact, this analysis showed that many people aren't looking for a job, they're looking for an opportunity that has purpose and meaning and belonging and community connection, and that they were able to then thrive in that role. In fact, one of the key aspects of roles and work that people do enjoy is the collegiality, is the community of the workplace. And when we asked employed Australians, where do you get community and belonging, that key social aspect of life, we found, for example, less than 10% said through volunteering or charities that they might be involved in. Less than 15% were talking about things like hobbies and clubs and membership organisations. About a third said sporting activities and the local neighbourhood gatherings, so that's where they got community. But the biggest of all, 70% of Australians who have a role said the workplace was the most regular place for them of achieving social connection and meaningful community. So work is not just a place that helps us earn money, but it can be good for us, particularly around that social health, that relational connection, and that mental well-being also.
Mazars is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping clients confidently build and grow their businesses. Experience a new perspective with Mazars. Visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.
Nonetheless, working from home definitely seemed to receive positive rather than negative responses across many areas. So what did people say were the biggest benefits to working from home?
Definitely, people expect that to be part of the normal. But interestingly, we had about 14% of people who wanted to continue what we have in the peak of the lockdown, everyone working from home all of the time. But that was quite a small minority there. And 25% said they wanted to get back to what we had pre-COVID, which was everyone in the office all of the time. But the vast majority of people, almost 2/3, said what they want is a hybrid. They want some time working from home and some time gathering together in the office, because as we've just shared with the research, that collegiality, that connection, that actual gathering together is important for us. But we want the flexibility of work from home. Why we wanted work from home, at least for some part in our week, is that it saved on the commute time. It saved on some of those costs. It allowed flexibility to achieve other things, the school drop-off or interacting with family members. And for most people, they said their productivity increased when working from home. That is, they had fewer disruptions and they could be more focused on a task, particularly if it was a task that required thinking and their own time and focus. For the collaborative tasks, for the more entrepreneurial type innovation tasks, they wanted to gather together, and that was best done in an office. So they still want that gathering as part of their week, but they definitely want some work from home as part of it as well.
So what would you say, Mark, are the biggest barriers to work well-being now?
Well, number one on the list was being overworked and stressed. And number two was hierarchy and inefficient structures. And then thirdly was the leadership. And when we went down the list and looked at these blockers that people had to them thriving in their role, a lack of training or issues with co-workers or a lack of trust and independence, it all came down to leadership. It came down to leaders and managers providing the right environment, offering the right direction, ensuring they were facilitating the right culture of engagement and connection. And so the biggest blockers to work, while there's many of them, ultimately come down to leaders not leading in the best way possible. And that doesn't require leadership in an in situ, in the room, in the office environment. Now we've got to be adept at leading virtual teams and teams that won't always be gathered together, hybrid teams that are sometimes gathered and sometimes scattered. And that requires a new form of leadership, but still it requires leaders who can not just focus on task, but team, who are not just committed to productivity, but the well-being of the people. And a funny thing about business, it's ultimately about people. And the people, when well looked after and when respected, will bring about those great outcomes. And that's the right priority to have.
That was McCrindle Research Principal Mark McCrindle, co-author with Ashley Fell of the new book, Work Wellbeing. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.